Alrighty, welcome to this brand new project where we're going to talk about scrub and also pin and also introduce you to smooth scroll. So there's a lot happening here. By the end of this video, this is what we're going to be creating. So watch this. We scroll down. Ooh, look at that. Now this right here is not pinned, and you'll see what pinned means, but we scroll past it, it'll come back. And if you pay close attention, there's a few different things that are happening here. So initially, we have this animation that comes in no matter what. This here is not tied to the scroll. And so we have two different timelines. So the first timeline here is for these typographic elements and this piece of type over here. But then this little line, as you can see, and this type, this watermark in the background, that is tied to the scroll position. All right, so that is scrub. All right, that is scrub true or scrub 1 or 2, and you'll see what I mean by those values. So I'm going to describe what our HTML looks like in the CSS, and then we'll get into the actual animation process as well. Okay. So if we look over here at the HTML, I do have an area right here where I've commented out a section. That's just because I want to be able to show you what the design looks like. And this is what you do typically, you know, if you're working on a design in the CSS and you don't want to have to keep scrolling down, essentially. So I've just commented this out. And in a bit, we'll go ahead and uncomment that because it's just it's height 100 viewport height, just so we can have something to scroll down to. In the future, we will have multiple actual sections of content to scroll through, but just for now, we're keeping it simple. So next up we have a section class of primary. So there's 3 different sections, one at the very bottom, right down here, and then this big middle section that has the content. So we also have an aside element, and this is basically 2 columns. All right, so there's an aside element that says diabolical and process. We're using the mask technique. And then we're also using the mask technique on the right column, which is just a paragraph. All right, so if I zoom back out and I show you just one more time, this is what it looks like. All right, so it's just, this is the actual project. This is the final project. There we go. So this is what it looks like right now. Your current state in the before state, the before folder. There's no animation, it's just at the top. So we have 2 columns right here and here. And then this line right here is actually a position absolute element along with this big typographic, I guess you could call it a word mark. It's a watermark because it's very low contrast in the background. That is also position absolute. And we're using transform, translate X to kind of push it off of view almost. It's kind of right there. And those can be found right here in these 2 lines, div class line, and then span diabolical. That's that huge type. Okay, and that's pretty much it with the HTML. The rest of the CSS is pretty straightforward, using a display flex on that section because we have 2 columns. Here are 2 columns right here. Here's the aside rule sets, and then here's the main rule set. And then we have our line and span. Those are both position absolute. The line information is right here, and then the span information is right here. Translate X 53%. That kind of gets it almost off. So you have to play around with these values initially when you're creating them. Opacity 0.07 rather. Okay, so let's go ahead and start getting this ready to rock. Okay, so we're gonna go down here in our area, and by the way, you see this element right here that's uncommented, Lennis. That's a smooth scroll solution. We'll cover that a little bit more in depth, I believe, in the future in this course. But the reason I'm going to show you how to integrate it is because when you're using scrub in conjunction with smooth scroll, it looks really cool. It looks way better. So I'll show you the before and after for that as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's get this rocking. So we got a bunch of new stuff to learn. In our script section, the first thing we're going to create is there's going to be 2 timelines. We're going to have a timeline just for the text to come in, and that is not going to be based on scrub. All right, so, or in other words, that's not going to be based on the scroll position. It's going to be based on timing. Once it comes in, it'll come in no matter what. This is important because typography and things that people need to read and see, or icons, or very important elements, they need to be visible, and they can't be cut off in half at certain points when you're scrolling. And that can happen with scrub. So a scrub-based timeline that's tied to scroll position, that's acceptable as long as you're not dealing with like important type elements. Like a watermark type that's in the background, it's not very important, that's fine. A line that grows, that's not important. That could be scrub if you want. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Const timeline, TL, is going to be gsap timeline. So the first one we're going to do is the actual scroll trigger for the type. All right, so scroll trigger, oopsie. And the trigger in this case is going to be section primary, okay? Very simple. So trigger is going to be primary. And then the start is going to be the top of primary and 20% down in the viewport. End is going to be bottom, and we'll just do center in the viewport. Next up will be toggle actions, which we just covered. We're going to do a play, reverse, so that's on leave, and then on enter back will be restart, and then on leave back will be reverse. All right, so we'll end up pinning this section as well, which you haven't done yet, but we're going to leave it like this for now. So we're also going to add some defaults, and that will be an ease of power 3 out and a duration of 1. Okay. So that's the timeline with our scroll trigger. Now let's go ahead and animate that. So we're going to say timeline, hit enter, from. Let's zoom up. I want to make sure you can see this. Control B to get rid of that sidebar. We're going to say our H1. So we're going to take our H1 and we're going to say Y% 100. All right, so if we save this, go back, there you go. And again, we're not scrolling down into it yet because we've uncommented. We left that section, the top section, commented rather. So we're just going to get this ready to rock before we do that. Next one is going to be from. And the selector for this one, we just want the paragraph in our aside element. And so we're going to say aside P, which is the, I think, process it says. Is the actual type. This will be Y%. I had to use 140. Otherwise, we could have used the same exact value here in an array and then just use stagger if we wanted to, but this will work just fine right here. I am going to use an offset. I'll show you what it looks like right now. So see, it kind of takes a while because it's waiting fully for this to finish. So we're going to use a negative offset. That's going to be minus equals point. I found 0.8 to work pretty well right there. There it goes. So now they're almost at the same time, but not quite. Refresh this here in a second. There we go. Okay. And then finally, we have the paragraph on the right, which is main P for the selector. This would be Y%. This one had to be higher, 210%, because of the multiple levels of type. There's 2 lines of type in this particular example. And again, we're not dealing with responsiveness or mobile stuff yet. Keeping things simple here, just desktop basically. And so we're also going to say opacity 0 as well, just to fade it. And we're going to give it an offset of -1 second. So it's going to happen minus equals 1. Alrighty. So now they all come in fairly close together. I like it. Next up, we're going to create an entirely separate timeline. So underneath this timeline, we're going to create a timeline called scrub timeline. All right, so gsap timeline. Let's just let's copy some of this stuff. Let's just copy this scroll trigger itself. All right, and this is also going to be the same trigger, primary. Both of them are primary. The start here, I think we're going to use 30% for this, top 30, and then 40% top. And again, I really advise just playing around with these values just to see what they do. And then here is where we're finally going to use scrub. And in this case, we're just going to say true. All right, so we're going to save it. And then again, nothing happens yet because we haven't attached any animations to it. So what we're going to say is scrub TL, and then we're going to from that. And we literally only have two different from methods that we have to specify. First is going to be the line, and it's going to be scale Y 0. GitHub Copilot was incorrect. It said scale X. But yeah, we want to grow it on the Y axis. And then also from, we'll do the span element. And there's only one span element, and that's that big typographic word mark in the background. It's right up here in the HTML, right there. Span diabolical right there. All right, so span is going to be a X0 and Y% 0 as well. I found that I had to specify both of these in order for this to work correctly. And this happened to me a couple times. So I just specified both of them. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to start this one at the same time, which is a less than sign. Okay, so let's try this out and see what happens. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to uncomment that section. So let's save. Now we'll have to scroll down. So let's go back, refresh, come down. Oh, okay. So as you can see, when we scroll down, notice how jagged it is. I don't like that. This is where the scroll trigger is going to come in. I mean, smooth scroll, sorry. So we're going to uncomment this line right here. And I'm going to show you the website. It's called Linus Smooth Scroll, and it's by Studio Freight, which I'm going to be interviewing pretty soon on my YouTube channel. They're one of the top design agencies, and they came up with this smooth scroll and made it available for everybody else to use. So if you type in linus.studiofreight.com, you'll see their website. And there's a GitHub. So you could scroll down. This is a cool landing page and all that stuff. But if you go to check it out in GitHub, it'll tell you how to install it. That's the script tag I'm using right here. And then I just copy this, the basic setup right here. It's just a few lines of JavaScript, and it works out of the gate. So I'm just going to paste that information right here. We don't have to have this, the on scroll. We don't need to do that. So if I save it now, watch what happens. Look, it's now smooth. It's not real jagged, because if you look at the actual scroll bar, when you use your mouse scroll wheel, it's nice and smooth. And there are settings in Linus for you to dictate how that works. If you want this to be even smoother, you could change scrub true into scrub like 1, meaning it'll take 1 second for it to catch up. So it'll be like a delay. I actually like value of 2, but just to show you what 1 looks like, we stop scrolling and it stops about a second after. If you want it to be a little bit more exaggerated, we just change that value to 2 or a higher number. And look at that. It's so buttery smooth now in conjunction with the smooth scroll. All right, so I scroll down. We see this timeline right here. That is not a scrub-based timeline. That's a time-based timeline. It comes in no matter what, but the height of this element right here and the X position of this one is certainly tied to the scroll position. And that, my friends, is how you create a really cool section of a landing page or a website with multiple timelines, with scrub, and smooth scroll. The one last thing I'm going to talk about is pin. Pin is very cool. It's just one property, and we're going to add it on the first timeline. So I'm just going to say pin true. Watch what happens when we do this. So I'm going to scroll up. We're going to come down, and I'm going to scroll down and just watch. Did you notice that? It sticks. The whole section is pinned for the duration of where the start and end values are for that, for the start and end, the top and bottom of the selected or the specified target element. If you want it to be a different element other than primary, you can specify it here as a selector instead of true, I believe. And so this right here, having it pinned like that is a really cool potential way of dealing with your sections and keeping things, you know, perhaps a little bit more dynamic. And you could do a lot of interesting stuff with pin as well, and we'll do that in the future as well in this course. For me, for this example, I kind of don't like pin, so I'm just going to leave that at false. Like that. It's kind of a little bit more freeform. It's obviously not stationary for X amount of time. And there we go.